sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. Now do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do do do.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are on the planet. Welcome to Spirit Cafe on the New Thought Media Network. I'm Barbara Schreiner-Trudell, and my co-host Cheryl Rogers is under the weather today and will not be joining us, but I hear she's going to watch, so we'll hear what she has to say after the show. I am so delighted to have you here today. Let us begin with our land acknowledgement. We work, live, and play on the historical and traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. And as we gather from many places on Turtle Island, we as settlers are grateful for the opportunity to meet here. And we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years, including the Métis, Inuit, and all Indigenous peoples. And though we are not of African descent, we are committed to continually acting in support of and in solidarity with Black communities seeking freedom and reparative justice in light of the history and ongoing legacy of slavery that continues to impact Black communities in Canada and the US. In support of creating belonging for all BIPOC, and we acknowledge the contributions made both in shaping and in strengthening our communities and our countries. And we make this acknowledgement as we strive to be allies and take an active part in reconciliation. We recognize our oneness, we realize our history, and we choose to create a new reality. We are one. Well, my guest today is Mel Horvath. She was with us a little while ago, and the conversation was stellar. And so today we continue. Ordained in 2014 in the spiritualist tradition, she is a mediator and spiritual director. She is also a healthy congregations facilitator. She resides in Waterloo, Ontario, and works in restorative justice. And today we are talking about endings, Mel. And the thing people love the most.
Yeah, I was thinking, sort of endings, what Western people truly suck at. And we really like beginnings. We really struggle with endings. And the curiosity I've been having is this partly because of our lens and mindset around change and what is our relationship with endings, and noticing how much disorientation there is with this space between what we think is beginning and what we think is ending, and that we really don't know. We really don't know. Like we will say, and this was the ending, and then boom, it was the beginning of something. And we'll say, this is the beginning, and we miss all the things that ended. And so for me, it's been a dance between beginning, endings, and the space between, and an opening of what is that meant to teach me, and how can I show up in that, versus a resistance to certain things because they're really change is what we're talking about.
We're talking about change, and for whatever reason, there is so much resistance to it that it creates a great deal of suffering, because we're holding on to that which is complete and wondering why we're not receiving that which is ready to be birthed. And it's that holding in, that resistance, that looking at it as, oh, this is bad or awful, so I don't want to have it. So we sit back and we create suffering by our unwillingness to actually go with the flow of energy.
You said something too about this idea of completeness, and part of me is wondering too about how we will take an external experience and attach ourselves to it. I feel almost as though there's a strong Buddhist energy in this current conversation too, where this idea of suffering, because we've
Yeah.
said, I am this thing that was external to me. Who am I without this thing? Who will I be if I go through this?
Uh,
Um, and this idea of wholeness within ourselves is
yeah.
what I'm noticing right now.
Well, and the interesting thing is, I think for each one of us, that as we get comfortable with who we are and where we are and accept that life is what life is, constantly moving, flowing, shifting, altering, the comfort that we feel in that energy of movement is actually something that provides us with a greater sense of joy and peace. But it is our resistance to the natural movement of things that causes us to feel restricted or stuck or broken or hurt or upset or whatever other feelings we have. And I've noticed it, especially around death and dying, that there's a real energy about, it can't happen, it shouldn't happen. And of course, now with people using assisted dying, medical assisted dying, I think again there's more questions that come up with that, because there's some people who feel, well, no, because there's always hope. But at what point do we sit back and go, okay, I'm complete with this part of the journey. Now what?
Hmm. What I noticed from what you're saying, I actually wrote a quote before we started this talk, and it's by Wayne Teasdale, and it says, "It is not what we do, it is how well and fast we can integrate with what is."
What
It is
is?
not what we do, it is how well and fast we can integrate with what is, and not that that becomes a kind of goal for perfection, but simply the practice is, hey, what's going on here around me? But also the piece that I think that we've really with colonialism learned and been taught to go outside of ourselves for what's going on for me right now versus going in and saying, what's going on for me with what I can see, understanding there will be blind spots. The
Yeah.
idea of Johari's window, there's things that I will see that others don't. There's things that others will see that I don't. There's this whole arena happening. We're not meant to see it all. And making choices isn't about the right one, but rather the next step. And I often find the next step can be found when we touch in and say, okay, this could go a million different ways, but who I will be in this is, how I want to be in this is.
I think as we get comfortable with who we really are, like not looking outside. I was reading something by Bruce Lipton the other day about how our subjective mind, the subconscious mind, is developed, of course, between the ages of 0 and 6. And so we're living today as adults a little older than 6. Okay, a lot older than
Year or
6.
two, year or two, year or two older.
Yeah, a little minute. And as such, we're living from this subconscious thing that's going on, because my conscious mind is probably utilizing about 5% of its capabilities. And so what's happening, what he said in there is, because the subconscious mind is actually what's sort of moving everything forward, we are actually not living our own lives, we're living somebody else's life.
Hmm. That's yeah, we're actually not living our own lives, we're living somebody else's life. I my personal experience with death has been quite intimate. I had the death of my dad when I was 8, a sister when I was 10, both in 2 different car accidents. So there was a part of me
Oh,
that actually grew up thinking we just die via car accidents, in my young little childlike brain.
of course.
Um, and then my mom passed away 7 years ago from ovarian cancer.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, I had grandparents who lived well into their 90s and a great uncle who just passed away a couple of months ago who was nearly 100. And in that experience of personal death, and also in the experiences of working in congregations and walking with folks through the experience of uh, ending their earthly life, noticing the space of complexity between the reflections that happen at the end of our lives. And I found myself somewhere in the journey with my mom,
Mhm.
looking at an article by a hospice nurse, and she wrote the 5 most common regrets. And you just
Oh,
touched on number one. And number one is, I wish I had had the courage to live a life true to myself and not what others expected of me. And so, this idea of maybe we don't know exactly who our souls are, I'm coming to the place now of recognizing that's the journey. So, I can slow down my pursuit and be a little bit more savoring and
mhm.
gentle and slow in this process of uncovering and rediscovering and remembering, putting back in pieces that I had let go of, all of these different things, and that this is the journey back to self.
Yes.
And that when we journey back to self, some of these things that we fear actually just simply cease to exist. We see how connected we are. We actually can live into the unity idea of oneness and see ourselves in the beginning and see ourselves in the ending and see ourselves in life, rather than, like you said, how we see ourselves in others' lives rather than seeing ourselves in our own life.
Yeah, my daughter, I mean, we both have teenagers. My daughter just turned 18, and in sort of talking with some of her friends, what surprises me, given the evolution and given the experience I have with my child, and I think probably the experience you have with yours, is that there's still kids out there who are living from the idea that, okay, so and so said I have to do this, so that's what I have to do. Or, they're being pushed and molded. The maybe the guidance counselor at the school goes, well, here's the place where you'll be able to get a job and earn money. Not here's what you will love, here's what is great for you, here's what will lift you up, or allow you to fulfill your life urge, but here's where you can earn a buck. And I think that message to our children is such an awful message. I think we should be finding, like, every time I talk to them, it's like, no, find you what makes your heart sing. What do you like? What is interesting to you? And do that. And my daughter's a singer, and so that's what she's pursuing. And in school, they were trying to talk her into, you got to go to university here, there, do this or that. And I said to her, do what you love. So she's taking a
Mm.
gap year. And I went, good on you. Take that year. Hi, Michelle. Glad you're here with us today.
I find myself emotional at what you're saying, because as part of my professional work, I go into schools and I teach 2 things. I teach 2S LGBTIQ plus inclusion, and I also teach consent and the
Mm,
ways for which we can actually be in a healthy relationship with one another and right relationship with one another. And what I've come to understand, which has been wildly powerful and profoundly simplistic, is that what I'm teaching, and particularly it's working with grade 4 to 6 students and then teachers and everywhere in between, and noticing that what I'm actually going in and saying that's really, really earth-shatteringly profound is that it's not about inclusion of 2S LGBTIA plus folks at all. What it is resistance to the idea, first of all, that we have choices. We
mhm.
love binaries. We like limiting our
Yeah.
space because that feels, quote, manageable or controlled. So then we become very frustrated when we start to realize that this world is big and beautiful and that so much is existing outside of what we had thought. And so I find that it is amazing to me to notice I'm teaching you have choices. You in your life have choices.
Yes.
And when we limit, we start to notice all that exists outside of what we've said exists. And then the second piece with choice is this other idea of change. We will change. And how
Yes,
incredible it is to me that folks will struggle with, yeah, but you said, as though we're not going to change. The spiritual journey says, get on out there and you're going to get knocked down and get back up. And darling, you're going to change as a result. You're going to cocoon, literally die, and come back over and over in your life.
exactly,
And
exactly.
so for me, it's an incredible thing that choice and change are actually what's being resisted. Is, and what I would say is that I kind of look at the colonial framework, and I would say it's like a few folks got together to build a system or to build a shelving unit, built the thing, had 50 pieces left over, and said, yeah, I guess these 50 pieces just don't make sense, we'll put them aside. And it's
That
like,
is,
nope, they probably had some value, and we maybe
oh,
don't wonder why the shelving can't hold anything,
I
because
love that
we've cut
analogy.
out all these sort of pieces to make it
Yeah,
manageable, but then we can't be with what is because we're resisting all that's there, because it's just overwhelming. And overwhelming, like uh oh, why can't I think of her name in this moment? Williamson, Marianne Williamson.
oh, Marianne Williamson, yeah.
Yeah, we're not afraid of our dark. We're afraid of our light, darling. We are afraid of all that we could do, all that we could be, all that is. That's what we fear, right? What would happen if we said to our kids, do what lights you on fire, set your soul on fire, go do
Oh,
that,
go
right?
do that, go do
We're
that.
terrified of that.
Oh, and, and again, it goes back to, what Bruce Lipton wrote, in that first 6 years, because we're told, no, 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 don't do this, don't do that. This is bad. This is bad. This is good. This is, because the adults around us were afraid that our children would embarrass us.
And what I isolate out of what you just said is the word afraid, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And for those of us who are raised under a Christian template, it is not surprising to me that the number one most repeated phrase in the Bible is do not be afraid. 365 times, do not be afraid. And God is love, I am love, we are love. And so
Yeah.
for me, I'm noticing right now in my personal work and professional work that it's actually isolating it down to creating space to explore the many ways for which fear comes up within us and comes toward us, and how can we still mobilize and be our wild and creative and phenomenal selves in this world. And it's an operating system, because I mean, growing up for me, I was taught love was emotion, and now I'm realizing it's a state of mind, it's a consciousness, it's a way of living life,
Mhm.
to practice continuously what it looks like to show up with love, as love, for love, by love.
It
and
really, yeah.
yet that deceptive little piece of fear, which in Buddhism there's the opposite of love, which we may think would be um maybe hate, but oftentimes it's suggested it's actually indifference. We literally don't care anymore. But the near enemy, that thing that looks so close to love, that we oftentimes confuse it for, is actually attachment rooted in fear.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
afraid of failing. I'm afraid of losing. I'm afraid of being seen as stupid. I'm afraid of the ending. I'm afraid I haven't lived, so now I don't want to die. And I'm afraid to live because, and we go into that cycle.
And the majority of the things that we're afraid of are simply our imagination run rampant in a very negative direction. What if, what if, what
Mhm.
if? Well,
Well,
what if life was great?
and it was, you said that at the beginning, the story of suffering. We
Yeah,
we run the story of life in our head rather than taking a step in living. We would rather live a story in our head. And like you said, that what if reel runs both ways. What if I take this step and something awesome happens? But I find those steps are easier to take when I'm rooted in my truth. And those are not externally motivated. I am connected and okay on my own. It's that piece of wholeness that you were touching on.
yeah. Yeah. I think, for me, I'm a mother of four, grandmother of two, great grandmother of one. And for me, the journey's been about finding a willingness to love me as I am. And I was raised, you talked about consent and the things that you do in the school system. And, I think back to when I was just entering teenage years. I was 12 and I was attacked by three boys, held down and molested, sexually assaulted, I guess would be more accurate, and was so confused in my youth that I thought they liked me. And I hear similar stories today from kids who are looking at the negative attention that's coming their way as something positive, because finding out who I really am and standing up for myself would be too big a stretch because of the information I've received. So how do we begin to shift that, do you think, where we start to really honor the individual?
I've been thinking about this actually, so it's interesting you bring it up. And the story, that the lens that we put our experiences through, like you said, we can tell ourselves it was my fault. We can tell ourselves that's what I deserve. That's how I get attention. That's how I get love. We tell ourselves these stories. And what I'm noticing in my own life, so I'll just speak on my personal journey of coming into who I am, is that I
Mhm.
used to actually pick people for which I knew that they would judge me. And I would actually share a piece of my story. And
Mm,
I would do so in a way because it would keep me from having to accept an aspect of myself.
yeah.
And when I shifted to actually showing up in brave spaces and knowing the person in front of me. I've said this before, but we slow play our truth. We tell one another little bits about ourselves, and we watch for how can they will they hold that? Can they hold that? What will they do with it? Will they take it from me? Will
Hold it.
they try to fix, rescue, change it, or will they witness me and say, I see you in all your truth and
Yeah.
I love you. You are
Yeah.
not this thing that happened to you, and you're also not the roles we play. And so
Mm.
I think that this experience of life becomes purposefully disorientating, with many pulls that pull us away from who we really are. And what's coming to mind is the book Anem Cara by John O'Donohue. And in it, John O'Donohue talks about the idea of soulmates and suggests at a point in the book that what we do is we trade being soulmates, and not do not limit this to like a person or the sort of patriarchal idea of what a soulmate is, but rather soul friends. People who, Barbara, honestly, I saw you the first time you popped on the screen. I had never talked to you before, and I was like, and you are one of my people. Hello. It is so nice to meet you. And we hadn't had a conversation, and I knew that. And then
Yeah,
we've had conversations and I'm affirmed in that,
exactly,
right? So
exactly.
we when we release the idea of being role mates with one another, we then have more capacity to come back to who we really are. But we will dodge who we really are because it's not going to come without having to touch into places of shame. And shame for
Vulnerable.
me heals. Like there's, I think it's Rumi that says the wound is where the light gets in. Leonard Cohen too, the crack is where the light gets in. I think we can just keep naming wise mystics who say basically it's through those things for which we start to be able to let light in, or the sacred practice of taking broken the Japanese sacred practice of taking broken glass and actually gluing it back together, a teacup perhaps, and then putting gold in those places, those
Mhm.
marks, all these things that we
Oops.
think are somehow
Yeah.
what make us less than or not okay, and we try to keep ourselves small, are the things that in coming into that place of being who we truly are, we see that that is part of our journey, and we connect through it.
It's fascinating. Cheryl, who's normally on the show with me, Cheryl, the moment her and I met as well, there was that. Yes, sisters. There's that soul connection that is beyond. My daughter, her best friend was born 2 weeks after her, and the moms are best friends too. And it was fascinating because they consider themselves soulmates as well. It's that soul connection where we just know each other. There's some kind of a connection that's kind of hard to describe even, but very powerful, very positive and immediate. That's the other side of it. It isn't something that sort of evolves over time. It just is. It
Yeah, those
just
sacred people who are showing up in our lives to connect with us and be with us.
yeah.
And when I've been reflecting on this whole idea of our soul journey, part of the
Mm.
distraction too is number two on the nurse's most regretted list. I wish I hadn't worked so hard.
Oh,
The role we
yes.
play of who am I as this as what I do. I am what
Mm,
I do, and my exhaustion a measure of my worth, and how busy we keep doing those things that we will clearly get to the end of our life and go, yeah, I don't wish I worked harder. That's definitely not what I'm wishing. And yet when we put our identity in that, we then give so much of our energy, our life force, our time, our thoughts, our occupying of our space to that thing that's external to us. It will come to pass, and that's okay,
yeah.
right? But the roles, when we release the roles and we say, "Who am I?" we start to tap into that inner space, and that becomes potent. And the other thing for me is it's the space within us that nobody else can touch.
Yeah. One of the things that I tell those of us of my age and your age, but also the young ones, is that anybody who tells you what you should or shouldn't be doing, they really don't know what they're talking about because they don't know you. They
Hmm.
don't live inside of you. They have no idea of your grand potential and possibility. And so every word they say should really just bounce off going, wow, that's an interesting thought, because within us we do know. And I like to correct people who go, I don't know what my purpose is. And I'm like, well, you're lying to yourself, because absolutely within you, you do at some level know. And for whatever reason, you're resisting it. But you can find out. Now, we're going to take a little commercial break here. And while we have this moment of reprieve here. So, everybody, please stick around. You're watching Spirit Cafe here on the New Thought Media Network. My guest is Mel Horvath Lucid, and we're going to be back in just a minute to speak a little bit more about endings.
New Thought Media Network is on the rise. We're looking to grow with you. Do you have technical media experience, or perhaps a desire to learn? Are you willing to volunteer your precious time and attention? We share this message to benefit all. If you possess a computer with a camera and a microphone, we will share our knowledge with you. Behind the scenes or being the star, let us bless our one. Contact us at info@ntmedia.org.
change, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Welcome back to Spirit Cafe. So, Mel, we're talking about these endings. Relationships are always a good one. It seems like when a relationship ends, there's a real tumultuous energy that whether you're the one leaving or the one being broken up from, whatever, there's that resistance. And yet, more often than not, you knew it wasn't working for quite some time, but we hang on.
Yeah. And that's where I would dip into two ideas there. One is, can we meet our fear of ending, right? And I wonder if just the same as we attach to the role of our job, we attach to these different roles that we play. Role as parent, role as partner, role as sister, role as daughter, role as all of these different things that we become roles to, and that we look around and go, hey, who will I be if I'm just me? But then that can become the curiosity. The second piece is a really, really key point that if I probably only said one thing today, this would be the thing I'd want to say.
Yeah.
In my own journey with death, I noticed it changed me. And I noticed that folks when I was younger would say, oh my gosh, you think about things differently. And like you, I processed the story that my difference was defective.
Yeah.
And I somehow needed to figure out what they knew that I didn't. And one of the differences is that for me, I'm a high change person, in part because life gave me experiences for which those change happened. They happened, there was losses of people. And so one of the things I do often in my life that I thought was it, and maybe it is different, that's okay. But I often will ask myself, even in moments of meeting somebody in a cafe, to moments of sitting in front of somebody I've known for years, to moments with my kids, to moments with my friends, to moments in my job, I will ask myself, if this is the last time I see you, who would I want to be with you and what would I want to say? And there's
Wow.
a song by John Mayer that says, say what you need to say. And there's an article, and this is the part that I wanted to make sure I said, that says the happiest people are people who think about death daily. And I noticed that there's an inner okayness for me with the process of death, in part because I've walked alongside death, but also because I live on the edge of every aspect of myself. I dance with fear. I figure out how to become friends with fear, and then I do the thing over and over again with courage. I live from a place of heart. And
Yeah.
that was judged. Well, it means you don't care. No, it means that I do. And that's why I'm showing up now. Because times when I listen to people say they regret things, oftentimes it's actually more that I wished I would have had the courage to share my feelings. I wish I would have done the thing, not the things we didn't do, but the things we feared doing that haunt us
Absolutely.
most in our brain.
I think that for me is a big one. You know, can I stand in the middle of my vulnerability
Mm,
and just be who I am and know that I'm going to make mistakes, that I'm going to fall down, but I have the ability to get up. It's like we sometimes think that we make a mistake, that's the end of the world. No, it's just a new opportunity that shows up as a result. And I like to think that all is well. You know, it's one of my favorite sayings, all is well. All is well. Doesn't matter what it looks like out here, because everything out here has already been created. So I got to go back in here if I want to create something new or different or whatever. It's like opening up to something brand spanking new. And like you, I've had a lot of experience with death as well. And I'm okay with it. It's like it is what it is. You know, whatever is happening, wherever the endings are and the beginnings are, there's some kind of an evolution that's happening that I can't even begin to comprehend, but I'm okay with it, having had some experience, that I perceive as being, a bit of a connection to the other side, things that have happened that are inexplainable, that help me to feel like death really isn't an ending actually at all. It's a shedding of this and a new experience, whatever that looks like. So for me, death is like, stepping through a curtain into another reality or some such thing like that. I don't know. For me, it's just different. I'm okay
Yeah,
with
I think there's a quote that says that the known is like a corpse dead, the unknown, that's where the fruit is, but it's out on the limbs. You got to go out there. And so
it.
we want to live, but we don't want to risk. And I need to be certain, but we know life's not certain. And we actually know, similar to the journey of Maya Angelou, she went through some incredible things. And,
Yeah.
and then was finding herself paralyzed. And she said, I looked and I was like, I'm going to be successful at death. That I know, right? Historically, we've all that have come before us have died, but we're pretty
Exactly.
much certain we are all going to die. So when we worry about that, and I worry about the decline of somebody, or I'm worrying about all these things, it's like, no, what do you want to do? You know that this is an impermanent experience. What
Yeah.
do you want to do with your one wild and precious life? What do you want to
Yes.
do? And I think in so many ways, this idea of limiting our world means that oftentimes we miss what we really want. And number 4 of the nurse's top 5 list was, I wish I would have stayed in touch with my friends.
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
And so
How
I
many
think
times
about
do you think of somebody and
Western.
not pick up the phone, right?
Yeah, and I want to plant a seed that I think that within Western culture, we don't have language that properly explores things. So for example, in Indigenous culture, partner means one who walks with me.
Mm.
When we broaden out the idea of partner to that, we can look around us and see how we are held in a multitude of ways. And we can also look at the ways for which we resist or
Yeah.
won't allow people to walk with us. But
Mm.
this idea that people are looking back on their lives and saying, I wish I would have connected. I wish I would have had more fun. I wish I would have done a bit more of that journey.
Yeah, why didn't I dance more, sing more, play more,
Mhm.
make more mistakes that I would survive? Like, I think we're so afraid of making a mistake. I think, being afraid that we'll make a mistake and do something wrong, or that we'll be hugely successful and that'll put added pressure on. I think there's fear at both ends of those things, the failure and the success. So it's like, can we just get into life and leave the future and the past behind, be present with what is.
What I value about what you just said, fear at both the ends. Oh, so you mean fear basically is going to show up before every truth, before everything worthwhile on either side, on
Yep.
either side. And so if we've regretted more the things we haven't done than the things we have, then we can become a bit more courageous to step into our lives, to get curious about who we are and
Yes.
and meet that. Number 5 is one that I have noticed most in my life I've struggled with, and that is for me in part because of having such a loss heavy childhood.
Mhm.
And it is, I wish I would have let myself be happier. And
Oh,
I'm drawn back to the story Brene Brown tells about a man who, he says, I never let myself get too happy or too sad. And that was like his plan. And he lived his life that way. And then when his wife died, he realized that what he grieved most was it didn't soften the grief of that loss. It
okay.
just meant that he didn't get to experience the fullness of that connection. So
Yeah.
this idea that by limiting, I'm going to somehow avoid the pain, the wound that's the natural part of life, that's actually, um, the wound heals the wound, right? Many times. And
Yeah.
so by fearing this loss, then he never quite experiences the whole thing and looks back and says, I was afraid to experience that level of joy. And experiencing that level of joy would have allowed me actually to hold better this experience of loss. And I found that a really, really interesting piece. And I do think that that touches into that article and that study on the happiest people being people who say, today, this is what I have. What do I want to do with it in this now moment?
Yeah. A friend of mine was dying of AIDS, and we did prayer work together. And when I asked him, you know, what do you want? Right? Because I always pray for what do you want and how would you feel if you had it? Those are the two questions I ask. And he said, you know what? He said, I want to live. He said, I've never been afraid of dying, but I've always been afraid of living. And this disease gave me the greatest gift. Every day, family, friends, people would call, connect. He said, I just realized how great life is. So I want to live. He healed. He healed.
Hmm.
You
That
know,
draws me to my own experience of this idea of I want to live. And
yeah,
my mom's experience of the death of her husband and then daughter was that her grief turned to depression.
yes.
And I remember two pivotal moments in my life. One was at 17, going into her room. Oftentimes, she was not in a place to get up and have dinner. From 10 years old up, I would cook dinner with the hope that I would have somebody to eat dinner with.
Mm,
And I went into her room. I was 17. She was lying on her bed. And I said, Mom, come have dinner. And she looked over at me and she said, just leave me alone. I have nothing to live for. And that was a powerful moment for me. But if we just held her process of life, the other pivotal moment was in the hospital room after a week of trying to get somebody to look at her and give her a diagnosis that they said, you have stage 4 ovarian cancer. And she looked over at me and she said, I want to live. And they gave her an 11 and a half month life expectancy. They said that's about the medium. I am telling you, she lived 4.5 years and she lived more life in that 4.5 years than she had in the whole time from when I was 8 onward. And and incredibly lived life. Like, I mean, literally got diagnosed and got married to a wonderful man and traveled all sorts of places, and then somehow clicked in that she said the gift she wanted, two things she learned through that journey that were profound. What, well, actually three. One was the beauty in the mundane. So all the things that we rush through, even washing dishes became a sacred act. So the
yeah.
beauty in the mundane, the simplicity of connection, and really honed down her connections and dove in. I had a closer relationship with her. I healed more in that last 4.5 years than I could have ever imagined. And and two other orientations. One was she had read a quote that said, the gift I can give my family is to die well. The best
Mhm.
gift we can give our family is to die well. And I feel like she did that. And the
No
second thing is a quote that says, there's two ways to look at life. One is as if everything's a miracle, and the other as if nothing is. And
miracle.
she genuinely made a conscious choice. It was like she switched from that fear narrative to love narrative and was like, I'm going to look upon all these things and celebrate them. And her gratitude practice was woven in, and her prayer practice exploded. And so we think healing means that she would come out the other side and live, what, forever? No.
That's
Healing
what
was
I'm
that
doing.
she could be in what she was
Yeah.
and then own it in a way that she showed up fully. And she lived those 4.5 years of her life in a way that changed me through
Yeah.
simply being able to journey with her and witness that. She walked in her own shoes. And I was thinking about something you were saying earlier, and I was thinking how often, at least myself, and I know I'm not the only one, how we want to walk, quote, in other people's shoes. Like we can
Yes.
tell them what to do,
Mhm.
but oh my God, we're not going to walk in our own shoes and do our own stuff. And it was that moment she walked in her own shoes. And I mean, she owned that.
That's,
in a real
that's,
way.
oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. I remember my ex-husband, one of my ex-husbands, the one that I was friends with, that I that I enjoyed having around, father of my sons. He died 4 years ago. And what's interesting is perfectly healthy guy. Things were going well. He's supposed to go golfing with my son and got a headache, and so said, I can't go. I've got to. And within 24 hours was a quadriplegic, and within a couple of days couldn't breathe on his own. What was interesting for his last couple of weeks is that here's a guy who is like your rough and tumble, city worker guy who's gonna, have a beer on the weekend and watch sports, and that's life. And in that last few weeks, I think he was in hospital about 3 weeks before they unplugged him. And what was interesting is, in a lot of pain, unable to do anything, life just threw him a hell of a curveball. And in that time, every single nurse or doctor that came into his room, didn't matter how painful the procedure, he thanked them when they were done and said, I love you.
Yeah, these moments where we show up and we start to see things differently than we did before. And I was sitting with, when you were talking about the power of prayer, and I was sitting with the understanding of how deeply unity calls in meditation and prayer, and how, for me, Buddhism also weaves in supportive understanding what
Yeah.
it looks like to sit back for a moment, touch into ourselves, touch into our own divinity, our own
Yeah.
capacity, and to witness what's going on, to simply witness, to not react, to not create a story, to not jump to any conclusions, but to be very, very present
Yeah.
in what is in that moment. And it is those moments where we can go, I am in the hardest journey of my life, and look at all these people
Yeah.
around me.
Yeah.
I did a deep dive into the hero's journey last summer, and it's really, really cool. It's this beautiful understanding of our journey, similar to the ways that our basically movies, all the movies are set up. Like there's this challenge, and then you're not sure if you can do it or not, and then you fight whatever that thing is, and then you come out the other side, and then you're going to repeat and repeat and repeat. I found that valuable, beautiful, and I
Mhm.
have found equally beautiful, powerful, potent, and maybe the balancing factor to that, the idea of the tarot card, which is the fool's journey. And the
Mhm.
fool's journey, similar to the hero's journey, has you set out on this journey, and you know that you're going to fall down flat on your face over and over again, but you do it. But what's different about this journey is you're still going to need to experience these challenges. You'll notice, though, that I'm using different language, where I'm not fighting
Yeah.
something, I'm experiencing something challenging. And
Exactly.
in it, that the fool can look around and go, I am not alone in this. I am falling down and getting back up, and there's this hand here holding. There's this person here helping. Look
Yeah.
how held I am. And the orientation to both seeing how we are co-creators of our life, but how we are also so connected with others, and having magic and mystery woven and holding us the whole way through.
Yeah. Never separate from. Yeah, always connected, always connected. I think I've had some of the richest experiences in moments with people that I don't know, where there's that moment of, I see you, that click that just happens. It appears like it's by accident. You're walking down the street, and I remember walking down the street and seeing somebody sitting on a park bench reading The Godfather, and immediately I went, oh, great book. Like I read that a zillion years ago when I was a teenager. And then our exchange, which ended with, I love you, right? There was this immediate feeling of connection. And I think we sometimes forget that there is only one thing going on, and we all are a part of it. That there's no place where you are and I'm not, or where the energy isn't fully present. And I think sometimes if we could come to terms with that everything is simply energy, and it's all intermingled, it's all together, it's all somehow, I might be the microcosm of the macro, but I'm part of it. And what I think about and how I focus my attention moves that energy somehow. Which, where am I going and how am I doing it? And can I just be in that dance of life without having to define it as good or bad or right or wrong? What if it just is? What if it just is a way to experience, to express, to allow, but to be alive?
Mm. Mm. I feel like that's it. Like I feel like that's it, is that this idea of can I identify with? Can I identify with it? And for me, that's that felt sense and the spiraling back into ourselves piece that we resist, is that it's, I know in restorative justice work that particularly working with folks who have harmed sexually,
Hmm.
that I could hear their desire to have room to be the other aspects of themselves, to not be this one thing, but
Yeah.
rather to be the other aspects of themselves. And what I came to understand was, when I could, oftentimes I make things super practical and super simple,
Yeah.
but it's because it helps me connect. And it was just simply, can I identify with the aspects of me that harm and that have been harmed? And in that, somehow, then my connection to other folks becomes completely different. It's like you said, Barbara, we can meet somebody and we don't know them at all, and yet we feel deeply connected. And there's a movie, on a documentary of two Syrian swimmers,
Oh, it's a
called The
great
Swimmers, on Netflix.
documentary. Loved
What's
that film. Loved
what
it.
stood out to me
Hmm.
is that they have this family, their idea of who their people are. And in one moment, they're in a dinghy fighting for their lives. And
Yeah.
they are there for one another. They are with one another. And they have this epic journey together, and they're deeply connected.
Yeah.
And that is where that place of, not seeing the ways for which we harm, or resisting seeing the ways for which we harm, and resisting seeing the ways for which we've been harmed. Because we can also, spiritual bypass and try to just say it's all good all the time. And I'm not experiencing any of these emotions that are also healthy, like righteous anger, right?
Yes,
So it's
absolutely.
there. And yes, yes, you're good. It's
Yeah.
okay. You're in this moment and you're whole in this moment. And this
Yeah.
moment might be challenging. And that's okay. You're okay.
Yes.
You're whole just as you are right now.
Keep breathing, keep breathing, keep
Yes.
going on. Yeah. Yeah. I think we've come to, and sometimes in the New Thought teaching, there's a little bit of everything's supposed to be positive and good. And that's actually not true. We're supposed to engage in life as our unique special self and acknowledge that the unique special self of whoever's in front of us, they're doing their thing as well. And that there's a way of coming into collaboration and cooperation and a greater harmony, just accepting that each one of us is on a path, and I don't know yours and you don't know mine, but together we can, as partners, walk side by side for however long we do, right? We can have this experience together that's rich and rewarding if we sort of drop the walls a little bit. That like I remember seeing, that idea of stranger danger. That's not great. I didn't like that at all. I told my daughter, we walked by a table on the street one day where somebody was passing out all these pamphlets about stranger danger, and I quickly moved her aside and just said to the person, well, thank you for sharing. I thought, I don't want to teach my child that. I want to teach her that intuitively she knows where she's safe. Intuitively, she will know if the person in front of her is somebody that because we're all connected. Teaching intuition and understanding of that, our own rhythms and what's right for us, actually will help us to prevent being in a difficult or bad place.
Well, and I think those that are really deeply in practices with the understanding of New Thought and Unity ideology really come to understand that difference between a mindset and consciousness of love and practicing that,
Yes.
and meeting fear and running that as the way that we navigate what is. So, hey, this thing is in front of me and I choose how I'm going to be in it. Am I going to be in a presence of love and a consciousness of love and an awareness of love, or am I going to flip into that fear space? And can I be in a consciousness of love and meet fear? And that's been my most potently powerful place, is when
Absolutely.
I am loving, fully tapped in and saying, okay, fear, what aspect of me are you trying to show me now? Because like
Yeah.
you said, I noticed like meeting myself in every fear. So seeing myself in all those things that I feared, that's
Yeah.
like, it's like my own face looking back at me. And then
Yeah.
the second piece is seeing a human and our common humanity in every person I feared.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating, the journey. You know, you and I could talk for hours and hours and hours and hours. Unfortunately, we only have a couple of minutes left. What one idea would you like our viewers to take away from this conversation?
I would say the idea of what it looks like to tap back into your felt sense in a world that has said, measure who you are by these externals. Can you go back into who you are when you drop all those roles, all those other things? And that love is a state of consciousness, and it is yours, it is your birthright, and it is there all the time. And from that place, meet whatever beginning, ending. It'll be both an end, and it'll seem like an ending and be a beginning. Just meet them.
Meet them right where you are. Oh, I
Just
love
meet them.
that. I love that. Yeah, and for me, it's that every single person on the planet is created unique and special. And as we look within and celebrate our uniqueness, the light and the dark of it, what we soon discover is that is all people. And that as we journey along, there isn't you and me, there's this, and there's a way of being in the world that's unique to me and unique to you. And together there's a dance that happens that fulfills this whole prophecy that is life. So thank you so much for being here. I love our conversations. Can't wait to have more of them, maybe off air as well. And I hope you have a most fabulous springtime. And thank you, thank you, thank you. And for everyone watching and tuning in today, this is Spirit Cafe. You're on the New Thought Media Network. We're here every Wednesday at noon Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Mountain, and you're welcome to come and play with us. So be sure to like and subscribe and share with everybody you know. Let's get these great messages out there. Mel, thank you, thank you, thank you. You are a gift.
Likewise.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Change, change, you can do it. Change, change, it's a sure thing. Change, change, expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change.